All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Southern College of Optometry's August webinar on scholarships and contract seats. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you all are staying safe and healthy. My name is Avery Cunningham. I am a Student Services and Admissions Officer here at SCO. I am one of the admissions team members who will be answering your admissions questions and participating in the admissions process. Before we get started, I ask that we all use proper Zoom etiquette by keeping microphones muted unless speaking, limiting background noise, and respecting all of this webinar's attendees and facilitators. We will have time for questions towards the end, but in the meantime, if you do have any questions or concerns that need immediate attention, please use your chat feature at the bottom of your screen to communicate with us. Today, we'll be discussing scholarships and contract seats provided via SCO and some other outside agencies. Mr. Mike Robertson will open with a brief overview of the scholarship award process. Then a current SCO student and scholarship recipient will share his insights and experiences. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be free and available to view starting next week on our website. And with that, Mr. Robertson, whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're having a great day. It is about to be 100 degrees for 5 days straight in Memphis, so we are all sheltering in the air conditioning. But I just want to give you a good overview of scholarships and contract seats at SCO. I can tell you this, that we don't have 100% documentation, but we do believe we give out more endowed scholarships than any optometry school in the country. And I believe last year we were pushing upwards of 700,000 maybe in scholarships, and even more this year. So it is definitely something that we are very proud of and something that will come in very helpful for you. Okay, let's look at what we base scholarships on and what all are involved. And the majority of our scholarships are academic achievement type scholarships, but we're going to look at everything. We look at service and leadership and the commitment to the profession, which is usually demonstrated through shadowing work, attendance at meetings and conferences, etc. We have institutional scholarships that come based on strictly just about on undergraduate GPA and OAT. All of the scholarships, except for a few, are donor established, and you can see there what those requirements are. Sometimes a donor will restrict something to students from a certain state, or students maybe who are planning to enroll in the military or something like that. We also give out awards, not scholarships, but awards in the second, third, and fourth year for students who have outstanding academic achievement or clinical achievement. And those awards are often, they could be money, they could be equipment pieces, they could be trips to certain ophthalmic companies. So they're not always money, but they are all valuable. And again, those come after you enroll. Yeah, this year, class of 2027, like I said, we're pushing $1 million. And you can see the range there. And I think that's very important that the $1,000 scholarship is the least scholarship amount that we have. And you can see that out of all those scholarships given, only 25 are in that $1,000 to $3,000 category. 20, almost the same number, being in the 20 to 25. And then you see those that are 15, 10, 6 or 7 or 5. So again, a large number of scholarships awarded to our entering students. Okay, one thing you should know right off the bat: do I have to apply for a scholarship? No, you do not. All scholarships are determined by a scholarship committee here at the college. No separate application is required. No essay has to be written, anything like that. Everything is decided by a committee. And generally, we do award scholarships at the same time we give you an offer of acceptance. So in other words, we don't award you a seat and then 6 months later say, okay, here's the scholarship. We'd like to let you know up front exactly what that scholarship's going to be, and therefore you have a way to figure out what your debt is going to be by seeing how much money you're going to get. When we say that priority is given to students from non-regional states, you'll see later there are certain states that will help fund the tuition for students from their states. The reason they do that is because they don't have a public optometry school in their state or any optometry school in their state. So instead of building an optometry school, they will set aside money to give to a certain number of students to attend a school elsewhere. You see the average GPA and OAT. That's pretty important. Does that mean you will not get a scholarship if you don't have a 3.8 or a 340 or 350? No, it does not. But that gives you an idea of how competitive it is. The competitive nature for the school itself is pretty strong. Our entering classes usually have about a 3.6 GPA, and their OAT score hovers around 330. So you can see that to get a scholarship, you usually have to have higher numbers than that. One thing I would like to point out also, when I mentioned that non-regional students get priority, that does not mean if you're from a regional state, such as Tennessee, Arkansas, or Mississippi, and others, that you can't get a scholarship. But all things being equal, we're not going to give a student who is already getting close to $20,000 from their home state, we're not going to give them a $20,000 scholarship on top of that. So scholarships that go to those receiving assistance from their home state are usually smaller, in the $1,000 to $7,000 range per year. And that's important also that you know that scholarships do roll over. So if we say you're getting a $20,000 scholarship, you're getting an $80,000 in reality, because it will roll over every year unless your GPA falls below 3 point in most cases. And a 3.0 is definitely attainable in optometry school. Okay, we have some scholarships that we have set aside for specific people. And one of those is our new Scholars Excellence Award, which gives one underrepresented minority free tuition for 4 years. Now, you may say, well, what's an underrepresented minority? Well, let me tell you, that means African American, Native American, or Hispanic. Those are the underrepresented minorities in all professional schools. So one each year is granted free tuition for 4 years. We also have a minority endowed scholarship, which is also goes to underrepresented minorities. That scholarship is $10,000 a year. The Dr. Betty Harville Scholarship is for a minority student, $4,000 a year. And Dr. Harville was a longtime professor at SCO and was the first female African-American professor of optometry in the country. There's also a Dr. Parfit Endowed Scholarship, and this is the one I mentioned earlier for someone who's going to enter the military or whose parents served in the military. So it's got an attachment of military service to it. Okay, this is just the definition of what the regional contract program is. Tuition savings program that allows qualified students to pay in-state tuition, it says, and reduce tuition at private colleges. We are a private school, so there is no such thing as in-state tuition. So if you get a contract seat at SCO, current tuition for 23-24 is about $40,000, $41,000. You would subtract the amount of the contract from your tuition. And we'll show you some numbers later. But we just want to make sure you understand that it is, we do not have in-state tuition. So you can't be from California, Wisconsin, Nebraska, etc., and say, well, I'll just become an in-state student after 1 year and pay reduced tuition because we don't have that policy. Okay, so what are the requirements? You have to be a permanent resident of the state that is providing that tuition. And for most states, that means you must have lived there for a year and not attend a public school in that state. So, for example, let's say you live in Nebraska. We're going to pick on Nebraska again. You move to Tennessee, you live here for 2 years, and you don't go to school to any public school or to optometry school, then you would qualify as a Tennessee resident and can compete for one of those. But again, it is difficult. Some states have an obligation to return to the state to practice with that contract seat. Currently, Mississippi and Louisiana are the two contract states that require you to return to the state to practice, or all of the money that they bestowed you must be repaid plus interest. And actually, Louisiana requires 6 years. So Mississippi requires you to go back and practice 4 years. Louisiana requires you to go back and practice 6 years. In addition to, you must practice for an office that accepts Medicaid. I think that is a wonderful requirement. So you have to make sure that when you say, okay, I've got a job with Dr. Smith, that Dr. Smith's office accepts Medicaid, or that will not qualify for you to have that money forgiven. That it becomes a forgivable loan, in other words. There's a listing of the amounts. These are contract states, and there's a difference. You see at the top, Arkansas, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, and then South Carolina on the bottom line. And you see their amounts are all the same. Those are all states that participate in the Southern Regional Education Board's contract program. They are required by being a member of that organization to provide the same amount of money. You see that Tennessee, West Virginia, and Kansas have different amounts, and that's because they are not members of SREB. Tennessee is no longer a member, West Virginia no longer a member, Kansas never was. And you see that their assistance amounts are different. So Tennessee, if you've lived in Tennessee all your life and you come to Tennessee, or you've lived here the number of years you need to, you would get $13,200 a year in tuition assistance. So for those candidates who think Tennesseans get the best deal, they do not get the best deal by far, actually. Kansas students only get $6,500 a year, and Kansas also requires their recipients to return to the state for 4 years, or the money has to be paid back with interest. So those amounts are never really stable. The amounts from the states that are $19,800, it'll probably remain that for a couple of years, and then it should go up. Whereas Tennessee and West Virginia, I don't expect a lot of movement in their figures. You must realize, though, for Tennessee legislature designates a specific amount of money. We take that money and divide it by the number of students who are enrolled from Tennessee. So 1 year we may have 60, the next year we may have 50 Tennesseans. So when we have 50 Tennesseans, the students are going to get a little more money per each year as compared to when we have more. These are different programs, but they are similar to the ones you just saw. The difference being the states on the previous slide were, we determine who gets those contract seats. So if you're from Arkansas, South Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, we decide who is awarded the seat. In Tennessee, right now, every Tennessean is going to get one of those seats. But in Mississippi and Georgia and South Carolina, they restrict how many students can get it. So, for example, let's say you're from Arkansas and you want to get one of those seats. Well, hopefully you will, but only 5 people get that seat that awards them $19,800 per year. That's very important because in some years, no exaggeration, we have enrolled 10 to 15 Arkansans, which means that only 5 get that 19,800 per year, whereas the other, however many, 5 to 10 who came in without a contract seat have to pay full tuition. So it's not that everyone from the state gets that money. The states that you see in front of you, we have no input into the decision of who gets the scholarship. Kentucky, for example, they have a statewide system where you apply, and students who apply, they select a certain number, and then those students have 4 schools, I believe it's 4 now, to choose from. And then so they could say, I'm going to SCO, so send my money to SCO. Again, the money would be directly credited to the student. But they may choose to go to the University of Alabama at Birmingham. Same policy applies. The money is sent to UAB and they apply it to the student. North Carolina, very similar, except in North Carolina, you can take your money to any school, just about, I think, any optometry school in the country. So if you got a North Carolina loan, and it is one of those loans where you must go back to practice, and you take it to a school in California, the school in California would credit you that amount. And again, you would have to go back to to North Carolina to practice for 4 years or repay it. Virginia's is similar, only they give $5,000 a year. And the last one you see, which is pronounced witchy, that is similar to the Southern Region Education Board, but it is comprised of Western states. And so if you are from some of those Western states, you could get WICHE money and have it sent to SCO. However, that is difficult, and I won't go into all the reasons, but we have had Colorado residents over the last many years who have 1 or 2 a year have gotten some WICHE money, which you can see is a large amount of money also. But again, that's mainly the states like North Dakota, California, Arizona, Colorado, etc. And Colorado is the only one of those states that really makes it easier for you to have the money sent to SCO. Okay, there are other ways to help get money to help pay for school. And of course, the biggest one really is a military scholarship. And a military scholarship, they don't give out a lot of these. So don't go in thinking, okay, I'm going to get one of those. And even though they do award up to 4 years of payment, most students only get 2 or 3 years. They give a lot more 3-year scholarships than 4-year scholarships. And they're based on the same thing that we would give a scholarship on: your GPA, your OAT, how much you're involved in organizations, etc. And that military will pay for everything. They pay all tuition, all books, all equipment, and give you a living stipend to help pay for your living expenses. Of course, as you would think, you are required to go serve in the military for however many years you received a scholarship. There's also the post 9/11 GI Bill, which will cover if you were already in the military, and they will pay for housing up to 3 years. And then there's the Indian Health Service Health Profession Scholarship, which is for Native American and Alaska Native students. And you have to be a member of a federally recognized tribe. And we have a student coming in next year, I believe, that his tribe is in the process of trying to become federally recognized. And he hopes that that happens, of course, so he can apply for one of those. Those scholarships, too, are pretty, there's not a lot of them. And of course, if you're not Native American or Alaska Native, you're not going to qualify. But again, they are fantastic. They pay for all your tuition, books, and equipment. And I believe there's a living stipend with that one also.
Alrighty, thank you so much, Mr. Robertson. Mr. Robertson will come back in a moment for anyone who has any questions for him specifically regarding anything that he just discussed or shared. But at this time, I'd like to hear from Noah, who's a member of the class of 2026 and was a recipient of one of our more competitive scholarships, where he can talk a little bit about his journey to applying for optometry school, and more specifically, his journey to applying for scholarships and being awarded a scholarship, and kind of what that process means for him. Thank you so much for joining us, Noah.
Hi, Avery. Thanks so much for having me.
Alrighty, so starting off, just to give us a bit of an introduction, how did you become interested in optometry and what drew you to SCO?
Yeah, so I first became interested in optometry. I was kind of late in the game, I guess you could say. But I became interested mostly in my junior year of undergrad. Up until that point, I'd been really considering dentistry, and that was where I saw myself ending up. But as I gained more experience shadowing in local dental clinics and with oral surgeons and orthodontists, I just sort of realized that dentistry might not be 100% the career I was looking for. And I wasn't, I just couldn't convince myself 100% that's what I wanted to do. And actually, a family member of mine recommended that I look into optometry. So I shadowed an optometrist for a couple of days. And after doing that, frankly, I was pretty much sold after just a couple of days, because it really provided a lot of the benefits of a workplace that I was looking for, that you can see in dentistry, without some of the things that I was, a little bit more concerned about. Just to give you an example, one of the things I found spending time in a dental clinic was that there's this undercurrent sort of apprehension in your patients, because 95% of your patients do not want to go to the dentist. But going into an optometry setting, most of your patients actually do want to be there. And that can really change the entire environment that you're working in. And I noticed a big difference there. And that's what really kind of sold me on optometry.
Wonderful, thank you. So then moving on, when in the application process did you start researching scholarships or looking into financial aid?
Yeah, so touching on that, I really didn't start looking into financial aid and scholarships too much initially. I was mostly concerned about the education I would receive. And that's actually what drew me to SCO initially, because I'd heard very good things about the SCO program and from a number of optometrists, and looking at their board passage rates, that spoke for itself. And that was my main interest in SCO, was performance based. But then I started looking into more aspects of SCO, and I realized that they are very generous with their scholarship distribution. And combined with the cost of living in Memphis being relatively low for a city of its size, I really found that was a good combination, and something that kind of brought SCO higher up on my list of priorities. So really, I would say all in all, I didn't do too much research on the scholarships themselves. It really is a very streamlined process throughout the application process, where you can focus on your resume and your essay, and let those speak for themselves. And then if you are eligible for any scholarships, you'll be made aware of that. So that was kind of took a back seat. The scholarships did in my decision-making process. But when it came time to really crunch the numbers, that's when it came into play, and made a big difference.
Thank you so much. You touched on this a little bit already, but how helpful was SCO regarding financial aid throughout the application process? Let's say if you had any questions, or as you mentioned, when you were awarded a scholarship, what that process was like for you.
Yeah, so just in terms of the kind of lead up to receiving a scholarship from SCO, I was actually in touch with SCO just about my interview date, and I was trying to fit it in around my midterm exams for undergrad, and they were very amenable to working with me, and we ended up being able to find a date that I could attend an interview day in person, which was very nice. But I think a day or two before the interview itself, I received an email from Joe Hauser, and he was just notifying me that I was in consideration for a scholarship, and reaching out to see if I had any questions, um, just about the scholarship or the application process or anything else. So it was nice to have a little bit of a heads up going into that. But it was also very helpful to, like I said, I had the interview in person. And part of the interview process is a lunch where we talk about financial aid. And the financial aid department was very helpful. I know, I think it's just about every year they come up with an annual cost of living breakdown that takes into account, your tuition, obviously, and any related expenses to that. But they also look at the average cost of living in Memphis and, transportation and cost of food and things like that to give you a pretty solid picture of what your cost of living might look like, and how much you should be expecting to spend if you do end up at SCO. And I found that to be very helpful, especially, like I said, when it came time to run the numbers. I felt like I had a very solid understanding of how much it might cost to be at SCO specifically. And then just in terms of interacting with the financial aid department since then, they've always been very responsive. They're very on top of things, and they do a good job of making sure that you get the loan money you need, while also reminding you to be thrifty because you are still a student.
Great, thank you. And how do you feel at this point in your education, receiving a scholarship impacted your optometry school experience overall?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm just starting my second year, so I guess it's still early days in terms of my educational career even. But I can say that like Mr. Robertson mentioned earlier, there's a minimum GPA requirement if you receive a scholarship. And for my scholarship, it's a 3.0, which is actually very attainable. But it's nice to have a little bit of a bar just to put a little fire under you, a little extra motivation to succeed academically. So I think that's been maybe not always the most pleasant to have that bar, but it's been very helpful. And I think that's been good. Another thing is just to note is that I think contract seats may or may not have different requirements. So that's worth being aware of. But besides that, I think in terms of the bigger picture of things, in terms of my lifestyle, the scholarship that I've received has enabled me to make strategic slight upgrades in my lifestyle. Just knowing that I can make these upgrades because if I'm responsible with my money, I won't be facing insurmountable debt when I graduate. And I think that's kind of cycled back into my educational experience because as I've been more conscious about, you know, providing myself with healthy food rather than just whatever's the cheapest off of Kroger shelves. And, I've been able to focus more on my well-being physically and mentally. And that cycles back into my education and has really provided me with the best basis to succeed in the classroom, as long as I'm taking care of things outside of the classroom as well.
Great, thank you. And I think my final question, what advice or recommendations would you give to students who are researching scholarships or financial aid resources for optometry school?
Yeah. So I guess I'd have maybe two different pieces of advice depending on what you're researching. I think if you're looking into securing a contract seat, my best piece of advice would be to apply early, because that will maximize your chances of receiving a contract seat. I know several of these states have, a couple contract seats that they award annually, but they only have so many, and because admissions is on a rolling basis, the sooner you apply, the better the chance you'll have of securing a seat. And I think the same goes for scholarships that are not tied to local states, but maybe not as much, maybe to a lesser degree. I think also for, other scholarships that are non-state contract seats, I would really recommend focusing on your grades. Yes, that's kind of goes without saying, but focus also, don't neglect your personal development as you're focusing on your grades and those type of things and going through the admissions process, because I think what can really set you apart is not that you have a 4.0 in all your biology classes. There are a lot of people who can do that. And I think a lot of people do, frankly. We have, like Mr. Robertson was showing, we have relatively high GPAs and relatively high OAT scores. So there are a lot of people who are academically successful. But I think, if you take the time to step back from academics and develop yourself on a personal level, that can make yourself a much more competitive applicant. For example, I think, yes, if you're doing well in your biology classes and your sciences, that's great. But as an optometrist, you need to have clinical knowledge, and that's where the science and all those classes come into play. But almost as important as that is being able to relate to your patients and being able to build trust through shared experiences and interests. So if you can broaden your experiences, just take some time to grow your horizons and be able to, so that you can connect with people on a different level, maybe not just on, oh, we both know how beta oxidation works. Well, yes, a lot of people do, and very few people want to talk about how that works. So if you can connect on shared interests, like, oh, you like boating? I also like boating. Or, do you like rock climbing? Yeah. Oh, cool. I've tried rock climbing before. Little things like that go a long ways. And I think that's one piece of advice that maybe is overlooked sometimes, is to just not worry so much about your grades. Yes, they're important, but don't neglect other aspects of your personal development at the expense of grades.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. That brings us to the end of the questions I had prepared, but now I want to open it up to our attendees to see if they have any questions for either Mike Robertson or for Noah. You can use the chat feature at the bottom of your screen. There's a Q&A feature and a chat feature, and they both function pretty much the same way. If any of our attendees have questions for either of our guests, please put them down below. And maybe while we're waiting on those questions, Mr. Robertson, do you have any questions for Noah or additional insights based off of anything he shared that you feel like students might enjoy?
Yes, and Noah did a very good job, because he brought up something that I really didn't touch on, and that is when those contract seats are awarded. And again, that's from those states such as Arkansas, Tennessee, Mississippi, Georgia, South Carolina. If there are only 5 seats, it's basically, and Arkansas only has 5, it's first accepted, first awarded. What you have to keep in mind is, let's just say we have 5 fantastic Arkansans who apply at the beginning of the cycle, and we accept all 5 and award all 5. Well, 4 weeks later, one of them may decide to withdraw and go to another school. That seat will be recycled. So even though you need to apply early, which is July, August, September, there are often students who are awarded a contract seat who end up withdrawing to go someplace else, and we just simply recycle that one. When we recycle it, if you will, it's going to be to the most qualified. So in other words, we award 5 seats, and in between time, we accept 5 more Arkansans, and one of the first 5 withdrawals, we're not necessarily going to give the empty seat to the student who applied earliest. We're going to give it to the student with the best file. So you have to apply early to really put yourself in contention. You also never know what state is going to be really competitive. And I say that because one year we may only get 7 applications from a state that has 6 seats, and the next year we get 22 applications. So you can't really base anything on the previous year. I've had candidates say, can you tell me if my GPA and OAT score would be competitive for this contract seat? And unless we're in the middle of the cycle, it is hard for me to say because I don't know how many people are going to apply. So one year you might have every student who got that contract seat have a 3.8 and above, and then the next year it's 3.2 and above. So it is very difficult to determine ahead of time, but it is based on your file, how good it is, how much shadowing, how much leadership, etc. that you have. That's when we decide.
Great, thank you. I see that we do have one question from Shia Franklin. How much is tuition in Arkansas after the scholarship amount is awarded, and does the scholarship cover the full amount?
Okay, so tuition right now is about $41,000. Arkansas contract seats are $19,800. So you're left with a debt of about $21,000 that you are responsible for. And that's just tuition. So you got to pay books and equipment also. But complicate matters even more, I guess you could say, Arkansas will also award an additional $5,000 to any student who agrees to go back to the state to practice who already has a contract seat. So let's say you get one of those 5 contract seats, that's pushing 20,000. So you now owe about 21,000 in tuition. And then when the school year begins is when they offer the second award, and you take that one and you get $5,000 for it. So you can now drop it down to about 15,000 that you owe for a year. You could also get a small scholarship, excuse me, from us and deduct that. But since tuition is at 41, it takes a lot of money to get the full ride paid for.
All right, thank you. I'm not seeing any other questions. I'll ask one more time. If anyone has any questions for Mr. Robertson or Noah, please use the chat feature to share, and we'll be sure to get them answered. Okay, here's one from Diane. Is there a limit to how many scholarships may be stacked one on top of the other? For example, receiving in-state tuition through a contract seat and additional institutional scholarships.
Technically, there is no limit, but I think the most that any student gets would be 3. And that might be, let's just say you got a contract seat and then you got a $1,000 scholarship, a $3,000 scholarship, and a $2,000 scholarship. So there's not really a limit, but it's not going to be 3 $10,000 scholarships, for example. So most of the time there are, if you get a contract seat, your scholarship amount is smaller in that $1,000 to $7,000 a year range.
Thank you. And then a question from Ashley. Do you know how many regional seats are given to South Carolina residents?
Well, at the risk of sounding cruel, South Carolina is a very odd state. And right now, and I say right now because South Carolina could change at any moment, we give 2 seats per entering class. Believe it or not, there have been years we had 0 South Carolinians, so nobody got it that year. Then there's been years we've had 5 or 6. So if it's 5 or 6, again, only 2. But let me point this out. Let's say you're from South Carolina, you didn't get one of the 2 seats, but you have a really good record. Well, you could get a $15,000 or $20,000 scholarship. which is equal to a contract seat. So again, not having a contract seat opens you up to have a bigger scholarship if your file indeed warrants it.
Thank you. And then there's a question from for Noah from someone who wishes to remain anonymous. What is your favorite part about SCO?
Wow, that's a very good question. And it's a broad question too, so I'll try and answer it as specifically as possible while really addressing the full breadth of it. But I think one of the things that initially stood out to me about SCO was just during the application process. So I applied to two other schools, and both of those interviews were online. And um, it was a pretty good interview process. Went well. Interview itself went fine. But I wanted to see all the schools in person as well. So I actually ended up touring those other two schools in person. And the tours were adequate, I would say. They're very good. But it was sort of like I was just paired with a student tour guide, and they showed me the classes and classrooms and clinics and um, the facilities. Then, okay, do you have any questions? No, not really. Thanks for showing me around. Goodbye. So it was kind of bare bones, informative, yes, but pretty spare. And that was a big contrast to when I came to SCO for my interview. First off, the interview was in person, and this is coming out of COVID, so obviously there are some mitigating factors there. But that being said, the interview process at SCO was completely different than any of the other schools that I'd applied to. And it wasn't just, coming in for an interview and getting a tour. It was coming in for an interview, but then before your interview, they took some time to review your file and make sure they had everything correct and just ask you a couple more questions. And then the interview process was, the interview proper, I should say, was very just conversational. When you go into an interview at SCO, as of when I applied at least, your interviewer doesn't know anything about you except your name and the state that you came from. And it really is just getting to know you better. It's not discussing your academic accomplishments. It's not discussing how qualified you are as an applicant. It's just tell me about yourself. And, do you have any questions about SCO? How do you feel yourself fitting into this SCO community? And that was something that really made SCO stand out just kind of from the jump. But then continuing on throughout the day, we had our lunch with the financial aid department and a couple more informational presentations about living in Memphis and things like that. And then we had our tour. And throughout the entire process, I really got to see it was not just a interview and a tour, like a house tour where you get to see the facilities and then you get to leave. It was almost like being invited to a family dinner and you get to see the house while you're there because I had the chance to interact with students, with faculty, with the admissions department staff. So I got to see a much larger cross section of the SEO community. And what I saw was very encouraging because it was a community that was very tight knit throughout all different levels. It wasn't just the students are close and the teachers are close to one another, but separated from the students. And then you have the administration up on the 11th floor who does their own thing. It was not like that at all. It was very vertically integrated. And I saw that as a really good sign for a healthy community where I could find a place that I could support other people and also be supported myself. And I would say that is the thing that I enjoy most about SEO is having a community where I can receive an excellent education. But even when the going gets tough with that, I know I have people that have my back. And likewise, I can be in a position where I am standing behind other people when they fall in hard times. And I think that's been very freeing. And that's something that SEO has definitely lived up to.
Wonderful. And then I think those are going to be our last two questions, one for Noah and then one for Mr. Robertson. And this one is for Noah. How have you managed your time for academics, and have you found difficulty balancing it with your personal life?
This is also a very good question. I think that one of the biggest adjustments you have to make coming into any graduate program, but optometry school specifically, since I have experience with this, I can speak on it. One of the biggest adjustments you have to make is time management. In undergrad, I was able to put things off to the last minute a lot. And you can still, get by in undergrad. I would say some people, if you're just naturally brilliant, maybe you can do the same thing in optometry school, but not with very great success. The sheer volume of work that we have in optometry school is pretty crazy compared to undergrad. I think this past spring semester, I was taking 24 credits. So you don't have the luxury of being able to put things off and procrastinate and still get good grades. So you really have to plan ahead. You have to be responsible with how you plan your studying time. And I think, there definitely is a tension that develops when you have, a lot of studying to do, because you can't study for 12 hours a day every day and maintain mental sanity. So one of the things that I've found to be really helpful, this kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier about the SCO community, but um, having a strong support group, a group of friends who share similar interests, and you can spend time with them, outside of school and just kind of completely forget about your classes and, throw on a good college football game, or, go to the pool if the weather's warm enough, and just kind of get your mind off of school for a time. That can be very helpful. And I think also just, there's that kind of social aspect, and then there's also a personal aspect of balance, and that's just maintaining healthy rhythms and developing healthy habits. So like one of the things that I like to do is I really like to make, pasta sauce. I have a fun time doing that. So every Tuesday night is sort of my Italian Tuesday. So regardless of what's going on, I block off that hour, hour and a half to make my own pasta sauce. And that, it sounds like something kind of strange and simplistic, but having those rhythms and those habits that are non-school related really go a long way in establishing a clean break from your studies for a time where you can get away and enjoy yourself and then come back to your studies and be refreshed. And that's probably my biggest piece of advice for anybody who's wondering, like, could I balance the academic and the personal side? Yes, but you need to be intentional and develop those habits when the going's easy so that when it is more difficult, you have those habits to fall back on.
Thank you so much, Noah. And I think this will be our last question. Last two
I,
questions, and both of them are for Mr. Robertson.
okay.
For Mr. Robertson, how dependent are the scholarships for prospective students based on GPA and OAT scores?
Very dependent. I think you saw the slide earlier where it said 3.8 and 340 something were the averages for this past year's scholarship recipients. I failed to mention that we do award 3 to 5 financial need-based scholarships annually, and those are given out later in the year in February when we have the completed FAFSAs for each candidate, and generally they go to candidates with the highest need, and generally those are the candidates who do not have a contract seat or a scholarship. As far as how many regional seats we have for Tennessee, right now they're unlimited. We don't have a set number. In the past we did, but again, the state gives us an X amount of money and we divide it by however many students are enrolled from Tennessee.
Alrighty, then our very last question. How many regional seats are given to Tennessee residents?
And that's what I was alluding to is we don't really have a limit for Tennessee. Generally, we don't have more than 15 in an entering class, but we don't really have a limit per se for Tennessee.
Alrighty then, so that is going to conclude our webinar. I know that we covered a lot of information today, but I do hope that everyone had a great time hearing from Noah and Mr. Robertson about the contract seat process and the scholarship process. If anyone should have any questions, especially from Mr. Robertson, please feel free to reach out to him directly. Our next session is going to be a virtual tour of the SCO campus and clinical facilities, so please be sure to check out our website for more information on that. And if you haven't already, do complete our inquiry form where you can be connected to our network and receive a personal counselor and a personal brochure talking about all the great things we offer here at SCO. And please check out our upcoming and past information sessions on our website. Thank you again, everyone, for participating. This recorded webinar will be available on our website next week. But in the meantime, take care, and we look forward to hearing from you all soon.